Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here. In the next few hours, we're going to explore something truly remarkable, yet incredibly calming to consider. We're going to learn about ant colonies, how they work, how they organize themselves, and how millions of tiny creatures manage to build something so much larger than any individual ant could ever imagine. You don't need to do anything right now, except listen, get comfortable, let your breathing settle into its natural rhythm. There's no rush here. We have all the time we need to understand these fascinating little societies that exist right beneath our feet, often without us even noticing. Ants are everywhere. Right now, as you listen to this, there are ants moving through tunnels underground. There are ants carrying food back to their nests. There are ants caring for young ones, building new chambers, and maintaining the pathways that connect their world. All of this happens quietly, patiently, and with a kind of order that emerges naturally from simple rules, followed by many individuals. Take a deep breath. Let yourself settle a bit more. We're going to start our journey by simply observing. Imagine you're watching an ant trail on a warm afternoon. The ants move in a line, one after another, each following the ant ahead. They're not rushing. They're simply doing what they do, following chemical trails laid down by others, contributing their small part to something larger. An ant colony is not really a collection of individual ants making individual decisions. It's more like a single living system, where each ant is like a cell in a larger body. The colony as a whole can solve problems, adapt to changes, and survive for years or even decades, even though individual ants live for only months. This might seem mysterious at first, but as we move through this journey together, you'll see how simple interactions create complex results. You'll understand how communication without words, organization without leaders giving orders, and intelligence without consciousness all come together in the world of ants. Let's begin gently. Let's start by thinking about what an ant actually is, in the most basic sense. An ant is an insect. It has 6 legs, like all insects do. It has a body divided into 3 main parts: a head, a thorax in the middle where the legs attach, and an abdomen at the back. Ants have antennae on their heads, which they use to sense the world around them. These antennae are incredibly important, as we'll discover. They allow ants to smell, to touch, and to communicate. Most ants are quite small. Some species are barely visible, just a millimeter or 2 in length. Others can be much larger, up to about 2 centimeters. But regardless of size, all ants share certain characteristics that make them remarkably successful at living together in colonies. Ants belong to a group of insects called social insects. This means they live in groups where different individuals have different roles and where cooperation is essential for survival. Bees and termites are also social insects. But ants are perhaps the most diverse and widespread of all social insects, with over 12,000 known species living in nearly every land environment on Earth. Think about that for a moment. Ants have been successful in deserts and rainforests, in cold mountain regions and warm tropical islands, in grasslands and inside our homes. They've adapted to countless different environments, and in each one, they've found ways to build their colonies and thrive. The success of ants comes from their ability to work together. A single ant on its own is quite vulnerable. It's small, it has limited strength, and it can't do very much to change its environment. But when thousands or millions of ants work together, following simple rules and responding to their surroundings, they become capable of remarkable things. They can build elaborate underground nests with many chambers and tunnels. They can defend their territory against much larger creatures. They can find food efficiently across large areas. They can farm fungi, herd other insects for food, and even wage coordinated warfare against other colonies. All of this emerges from simple individual behaviors multiplied across many individuals. As you listen, you might notice your breathing has already slowed down a bit. That's perfectly natural. We're not going anywhere quickly. We're going to take our time understanding each aspect of ant colony life, piece by piece, layer by layer, just like ants build their nests chamber by chamber. Let's begin to understand how an ant colony is organized. If you were to carefully excavate an ant nest and look at it in cross-section, you would see something like an underground city. There would be tunnels connecting different chambers of different sizes serving different purposes, and ants moving purposefully through this network of spaces. But unlike a human city, there's no blueprint. No ant has a mental map of the entire colony. No ant is directing the construction with a plan in mind. The structure emerges from simple behaviors repeated many times by many ants, each responding to local conditions. An ant colony typically starts with a single individual, a queen. The queen is a female ant whose primary role is to lay eggs. She's usually larger than other ants in the colony, though in some species, queens are not much bigger than workers. After mating, a queen will find a suitable spot, often a small cavity in the soil, and begin laying eggs. These first eggs will develop into worker ants. Workers are also female, but unlike the queen, they cannot reproduce in most species. Their role is to do everything else the colony needs: finding food, caring for young, building and maintaining the nest, defending against threats, and more. As the first workers mature, they begin to take over the tasks of colony maintenance. The queen then focuses primarily on egg laying, often remaining deep within the nest where she's protected. In some species, queens can live for many years, even decades, continuously producing eggs that develop into new workers. The workers that emerge from these eggs will vary in size and role depending on the needs of the colony. In many ant species, all workers look roughly the same and can perform any task. These ants are generalists, switching between different jobs as needed. In other species, workers are divided into distinct groups called castes. Imagine a colony with different castes. There might be small workers called miners who focus on tasks inside the nest, like caring for larvae and maintaining chambers. There might be medium-sized workers who do most of the foraging, traveling outside the nest to find food. And there might be large workers called majors or soldiers, with bigger heads and stronger jaws, who defend the colony and help process certain types of food. In some species, the size differences between castes are quite dramatic. The major workers might be 10 times the weight of the minor workers, but all of them came from similar eggs. What determines which caste a larva becomes is often what it's fed during development and the conditions in which it grows. This is a beautiful example of how ant colonies respond to their needs without central planning. If the colony needs more soldiers, larvae are fed in a way that produces larger ants. If the colony needs more foragers, different feeding patterns produce medium-sized ants. The colony as a system adjusts its composition based on environmental signals and internal needs. Take a moment to let this settle. Breathe gently. We're building understanding slowly, like ants build their nests, one small addition at a time. The colony also contains males, but only at certain times of year. Males develop from unfertilized eggs. They typically have wings and their only role is reproduction. During certain seasons, often triggered by environmental conditions like rain or temperature changes, the colony will produce new queens and males. These reproductive individuals have wings and will eventually leave the nest for a mating flight. Picture a warm evening after spring rains. From many different ant nests in an area, winged queens and males emerge almost simultaneously. They take flight, often forming large swarms in the air. The males and queens from different colonies meet and mate during these flights. After mating, the males die, having fulfilled their only purpose. The queens land, break off their wings, and search for a place to start a new colony. This is how new colonies form in most ant species. A single mated queen, carrying sperm that will fertilize eggs for the rest of her life, digs a small chamber and begins the cycle again. She lays eggs, cares for the first brood herself without eating, often living off her own body reserves, and once those first workers emerge, the colony begins to grow. In the early stages, a colony might have only a few dozen workers. Growth is slow at first, but as more workers mature and begin foraging, the colony's ability to gather resources increases. More food means the queen can lay more eggs. More eggs mean more workers. More workers mean even more foraging capacity. The colony enters a phase of rapid growth. After several years, depending on the species, a colony reaches maturity. A mature colony might contain thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of workers. The largest ant colonies known to science, supercolonies of Argentine ants, can contain billions of individuals spread across thousands of interconnected nests covering thousands of kilometers. But let's return to a more typical colony, perhaps one containing 50,000 workers. Imagine this colony in cross-section. Near the surface, there are chambers where workers sort and process food. Deeper down, there are nursery chambers where larvae are kept at optimal temperatures. Even deeper, there might be storage chambers for seeds or other food items. The queen is usually in a central chamber, surrounded by workers who feed her and care for her eggs. The temperature and humidity in different parts of the nest vary. Ants move larvae between chambers to keep them in the best conditions for development. On cool mornings, larvae might be moved to chambers closer to the surface where the sun warms the soil. On hot afternoons, they might be moved deeper where it's cooler. This movement happens continuously, with different workers responding to temperature cues without any central coordination. The nest also has ventilation systems in many species. Tunnels are positioned to allow air to circulate, preventing the buildup of carbon dioxide. Some ants actively fan their wings to move air through the colony. Others build their nests with specific architectural features that create passive airflow as outside temperatures change. Everything in the colony serves a function, yet no individual ant understands the overall system. Each ant responds to local information, the temperature where it is, the chemical signals it detects, the physical touch of other ants, the presence or absence of food. From these local responses, the global organization of the colony emerges. Now let's explore how ants communicate. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of colony life, and understanding it helps us see how such complex organization can arise from simple interactions. Ants live in a world of chemical signals. While we humans rely heavily on sight and sound, ants navigate their world primarily through smell and touch. They communicate using chemicals called pheromones, which they produce in various glands throughout their bodies. Imagine an ant walking along. She's constantly releasing tiny amounts of chemicals from her body. Other ants who encounter these chemical trails can detect them with their antennae, which are covered in sensory receptors. By sampling the air and ground with their antennae, ants can detect an incredible range of information. Different pheromones convey different messages. There are trail pheromones that say, "this way to food" or "this way home." There are alarm pheromones that signal danger. There are recruitment pheromones that call other ants to help with a task. There are recognition pheromones that identify which colony an ant belongs to. There are many others, each serving a specific communicative function. Let's focus on trail pheromones, which are among the most important for colony coordination. When a foraging ant finds food, she eats some or picks up a piece to carry back. As she returns to the nest, she drags her abdomen on the ground, depositing a chemical trail. This trail is invisible to us, but to other ants it's like a glowing pathway. Back at the nest, other foragers detect this trail. They follow it, moving along the chemical gradient toward the food source. As each ant finds the food and returns, she also lays down a trail, reinforcing the signal. Soon, a steady stream of ants is following the trail in both directions, creating an efficient supply line from food to nest. But here's something beautiful. The system is self-regulating. Trail pheromones evaporate over time. If the food source runs out, ants stop reinforcing the trail. Without reinforcement, the chemical signal fades. Ants stop following that trail and begin exploring elsewhere. The colony's foraging effort automatically redirects to where food is currently available. If a shorter path to the food is discovered, more ants per unit time will travel that path and return, laying down more pheromone. The shorter path receives more chemical reinforcement than the longer path. More ants are attracted to the stronger signal, further reinforcing it. Gradually, most traffic shifts to the shorter route. The colony has solved the problem of finding the most efficient path without any ant understanding the whole situation. This is a principle that appears throughout ant colony behavior. Positive feedback loops create efficient solutions. A small advantage gets amplified through reinforcement, guiding the collective behavior toward effective outcomes. Breathe gently as you consider this. There's no rush to understand everything at once. We're simply observing how these patterns work, letting the understanding settle naturally. Ants also use their antennae to touch each other, a behavior called antennation. When two ants meet, they briefly touch antennae. Through this contact, they exchange information. They can identify whether the other ant is from the same colony. They can detect what task the other ant has been performing based on chemical traces. They can even exchange small amounts of food in a process called trophallaxis. Trophallaxis is particularly important in colony coordination. Worker ants that find liquid food, like nectar, store it in a special stomach called the crop. When they return to the nest, they regurgitate small droplets to feed other workers, larvae, and the queen. This food sharing spreads nutrition throughout the colony, but it also spreads information. The chemical composition of the food carries signals about what type of food is available outside the nest. Ants receiving food can detect these signals and adjust their behavior accordingly. If many ants are returning with a particular type of food, more workers may be recruited to forage for that resource. The colony's foraging strategy adapts to what's currently abundant in the environment. Alarm pheromones work differently from trail pheromones. When an ant is injured or encounters a threat, she releases alarm pheromones from specialized glands. These chemicals spread quickly through the air, creating an expanding sphere of alarm around the threat. Ants that detect these pheromones become agitated and move toward the source, ready to defend. The concentration of alarm pheromone indicates how serious the threat is. A single crushed ant releases a small amount, causing nearby ants to investigate. A major disturbance, like a predator attacking the nest, causes many ants to release alarm pheromones, creating a strong signal that mobilizes large numbers of defenders. Again, the system is elegant in its simplicity. Individual ants follow simple rules. If you detect alarm pheromone, move toward it and prepare to fight or help. When many ants follow this rule simultaneously, the colony mounts a coordinated defense proportional to the threat. Some ant species have developed even more sophisticated chemical communication. Leafcutter ants, for example, use multiple trail pheromone compounds that encode different types of information. They can communicate not just "there's food this way," but also "this trail leads to good leaves for our fungus garden," or "this is an emergency evacuation route." Let your mind rest with these images for a moment. Picture the invisible chemical landscape that ants perceive. Imagine trails glowing with varying intensities, alarm signals spreading like ripples in water, recognition codes in every encounter. This is the ant's world, rich with information we cannot sense. Physical touch also communicates information beyond chemical exchange. When a returning forager is particularly excited about a food source, she may move in specific patterns or vibrate her body in ways that stimulate other ants. These mechanical signals can amplify the chemical message, increasing recruitment. Different species have evolved different communication strategies suited to their lifestyles. Army ants, which are nomadic and hunt in massive raiding parties, use strong trail pheromones and physical contact to maintain cohesion as they move through dense vegetation. Desert ants, foraging individually across hot sand, rely less on trail pheromones and more on visual landmarks and dead reckoning to navigate. The communication system of ants is not conscious or intentional in the way human communication is. An ant laying a trail pheromone doesn't think, "I should tell others about this food." She simply follows an innate program. When carrying food home, deposit this chemical. An ant detecting alarm pheromone doesn't decide to help. She automatically responds to the chemical signal with defensive behavior. Yet from these automatic, unconscious responses, something that looks very much like intelligence emerges at the colony level. The colony finds efficient solutions to problems. It adapts to changing conditions. It makes decisions about where to forage, when to move the nest, how to allocate workers to different tasks. All of this without any individual ant understanding the bigger picture. Let's settle deeper now into understanding how work is distributed in an ant colony. This division of labor is one of the key factors that makes ant colonies so successful, and it happens without any manager assigning tasks. In a typical colony, there are many different jobs that need to be done. Food must be found and brought back. The nest must be maintained and expanded. Larvae must be fed and cared for. The colony must be defended. Dead ants must be removed. Food stores must be organized. The queen must be attended to. The list goes on. With thousands or millions of ants in a colony, how does the right number of ants end up doing each task? How does the colony avoid having too many foragers and not enough nurses, or too many guards and not enough nest workers? There's no central authority making these assignments. Instead, a system of self-organization distributes workers efficiently among tasks. The key lies in response thresholds. Each ant has internal thresholds for responding to different task-related stimuli. Let's imagine this with a simple example. Think about nest maintenance, specifically removing debris from chambers. Every ant can detect debris to some degree, but different ants have different thresholds for responding to it. Some ants, let's call them high-threshold ants, only start removing debris when it accumulates significantly. Other ants, low-threshold ants, start cleaning when just a small amount of debris is present. When debris first appears, low-threshold ants begin removing it. If there's only a little debris, these ants can handle it alone, and high-threshold ants continue doing other tasks. But if debris accumulates faster than low-threshold ants can remove it, levels rise to the point where high-threshold ants also start responding. Now more ants are cleaning, and the debris gets cleared quickly. Once the debris is removed, high-threshold ants stop cleaning and return to other tasks. If debris continues to appear at a low rate, only low-threshold ants keep working on it. The colony automatically adjusts how many workers are dedicated to this task based on how much needs to be done. This same principle applies to all tasks in the colony. There are ants with low thresholds for brood care who start tending larvae at the slightest indication of need. There are ants with high thresholds who only help with brood care when the colony is overwhelmed with larvae. There are ants with low thresholds for foraging who head out eagerly, and others who only forage when food stores are critically low. Breathe slowly. Let this concept settle. It's simple in principle, yet it creates complex adaptive behavior when many individuals with different thresholds interact. The distribution of thresholds in a colony can shift over time or in response to conditions. An individual ant's threshold for a task can change based on experience. An ant that has been foraging successfully may develop a lower threshold for foraging, becoming more likely to forage again. An ant that has been caring for brood may become more sensitive to brood care stimuli. This creates a form of memory at the colony level. If the colony has recently needed many foragers, more ants will have lowered their foraging thresholds through experience. The colony will be more responsive to future foraging opportunities. If there hasn't been much need for foraging, fewer ants will have lowered thresholds, and the colony will be less aggressive about exploring for food. Age also influences task allocation in many species. Young worker ants typically start their working lives inside the nest, caring for brood. This makes sense because young ants are inside the nest when they emerge anyway, and brood care doesn't require much experience or risk. As ants age, they typically transition to tasks further from the brood chambers. They might move to nest maintenance, then to food processing, then to defending the nest entrance, and finally to foraging outside the nest. The oldest workers become foragers, the most dangerous task, because it exposes ants to predators, weather, and getting lost. This age-based progression, called temporal polyethism, means that the colony doesn't risk losing young ants, who represent future investment to the dangers of outside work. Older ants, closer to the end of their natural lifespan anyway, take on the risky jobs. If a forager gets eaten by a bird, the colony loses an older ant who wouldn't have lived much longer anyway, rather than a young ant who could have worked for months more. But this age-based progression isn't rigid. If the colony suddenly needs more nurses and has few young workers, older ants can revert to brood care. If all the foragers are killed in a disaster, younger ants can accelerate their transition to foraging. The system is flexible, adjusting to circumstances. Task allocation also responds to colony needs through a process called social inhibition. Ants performing a task produce subtle signals, often chemical, that inhibit other ants from starting that task. When enough ants are already doing something, their combined signals suppress recruitment of additional workers. Think of it like this. When many ants are already foraging, they return to the nest carrying food and sharing it with others through trophallaxis. The high rate of food coming in sends a signal that foraging needs are being met. Ants with moderate or high foraging thresholds don't activate, but if food stops coming in, the inhibitory signal disappears and more ants begin foraging. The colony thus maintains balance. Too many ants doing one task creates signals that suppress recruitment to that task. Too few ants results in weak inhibitory signals and stronger recruitment. The equilibrium point shifts based on environmental conditions and colony needs. In some species, particularly leafcutter ants, division of labor becomes extremely sophisticated. Leafcutter workers come in many different sizes, from tiny minims to large majors, each specialized for different tasks. The smallest workers tend the fungus gardens inside the nest. Medium-sized workers cut leaves and carry them back. Large workers defend the foraging trails and help process tough leaves. The largest workers act as soldiers, defending against major threats. Even within the task of leaf cutting and carrying, there's further specialization. Some ants cut leaves. Other ants carry the leaf fragments back to the nest. Interestingly, tiny minim ants sometimes ride on the leaf fragments being carried by larger workers. These riders defend against parasitic flies that try to lay eggs on the worker ants while they're burdened with loads and can't defend themselves easily. Picture this scene gently in your mind. A line of ants carrying leaf pieces many times their own size, each piece with a tiny guard riding on top, all moving steadily along a trail that might extend for 100 meters through the forest. No one is coordinating this. Each ant is simply responding to local stimuli according to her role. Let your breathing deepen as we move forward. We're understanding more with each layer, building a picture of how these colonies function. The efficiency of ant division of labor has inspired computer scientists and engineers. Ant colony optimization algorithms used to solve complex scheduling and routing problems are based on the principles of how ants allocate workers and find efficient paths. These algorithms have been applied to everything from routing internet traffic to scheduling airline flights. What makes the ant system so effective is its combination of specialization and flexibility. Specialists can perform tasks very efficiently because they're well suited to them. But when needs change, the system can reallocate workers. This gives ant colonies both efficiency and resilience, allowing them to thrive in changing environments. Let's move our attention now to how ant colonies find and gather food. Foraging is essential for colony survival, and different ant species have evolved remarkably different strategies for obtaining nutrition. Some ants are generalist scavengers, eating almost anything organic they can find. Others are specialists, feeding on specific types of seeds, or hunting particular prey, or even farming fungi. Despite this diversity, certain principles underlie most ant foraging behavior. The basic challenge of foraging is this: food is scattered unpredictably across the environment. The colony needs to explore large areas to find food sources, but exploration is costly in time and energy. Once food is found, the colony needs to exploit it efficiently before it disappears or competitors find it. The colony must balance exploration and exploitation. Many ant species use a strategy called central place foraging. Workers leave the nest, search for food individually or in groups, and bring food back to a central nest location. This is in contrast to nomadic species like army ants, which we'll discuss later. For central place foragers, the process typically begins with exploration. When food in known locations becomes scarce, more workers begin exploring randomly in various directions from the nest. These explorers move somewhat erratically, sampling the environment, investigating crevices and vegetation, searching for anything edible. When an exploring ant finds food, the nature of what happens next depends on the type of food. If it's a small item that a single ant can carry, she picks it up and returns to the nest, often laying a trail pheromone as she goes. If it's a large food source that requires multiple ants to exploit, She returns to the nest and recruits help. Recruitment can happen in several ways. The simplest is trail laying, which we've discussed. The successful forager lays a pheromone trail from the food to the nest. Ants in the nest detect this trail and follow it to the food. As they return with food, they reinforce the trail and recruitment accelerates. Some species use tandem running for recruitment. A successful forager finds a nestmate and leads her to the food source in a kind of follow-the-leader behavior. The follower stays very close to the leader, touching her abdomen with her antennae. If the follower loses contact, the leader stops and waits. When they reach the food, both ants return to recruit others, doubling the recruitment rate with each trip. Other species use group recruitment. A successful forager returns to the nest and releases recruitment pheromones while moving in excited patterns. This stimulates nestmates, who pour out of the nest in the general direction the recruiter came from. The forager may make several trips, releasing more pheromone each time, until enough ants have found the food source. Take a moment to breathe and picture these different strategies. Each represents a solution to the problem of mobilizing the colony's workforce to where it's needed most. The distance of food from the nest affects foraging strategy. For nearby food, simple trail laying works well. Many ants can quickly form a trail and retrieve the food before competitors arrive. For distant food, the investment in recruitment must be balanced against the value of the resource. Some ants can assess food quality and adjust their recruitment accordingly. Higher quality food triggers stronger recruitment signals. An ant finding a rich nectar source lays more pheromone or recruits more vigorously than an ant finding a mediocre food item. The colony's response is thus proportional to the value of the discovery. Foraging patterns also vary with habitat. In open environments like deserts or grasslands, some ants use individual foraging with minimal recruitment. Each worker searches independently and returns with whatever she finds. This works in environments where food items are small and widely scattered, making trail systems less beneficial. In forest environments, where large food items like dead insects or fruit are more common, recruitment-based foraging is more effective. The effort of trail laying and recruitment pays off because many ants can benefit from a single discovery. Certain ants have evolved specialized hunting strategies. Army ants conduct massive raids involving hundreds of thousands of workers moving together in a coordinated swarm. They hunt primarily other insects and small animals, overwhelming prey through sheer numbers. The ants move in a front that can be many meters wide, sweeping through an area and catching anything that tries to flee. These raids are self-organizing. There's no leader directing the swarm. Instead, ants follow pheromone trails laid by scouts, and the trails continually branch as different ants explore slightly different paths. The result is a network of ants flowing outward from the nest, then returning with prey. The raiding pattern shifts from day to day as the ants explore new areas. Weaver ants, which live in trees, have a different hunting strategy. They patrol their territory constantly and quickly mob any insect they encounter. Using their strong jaws and acidic spray, groups of weaver ants can subdue prey much larger than themselves. They then carry the prey back to their nest in the trees, sometimes requiring dozens of ants to transport a single large insect. Some of the most fascinating foraging strategies involve farming rather than hunting or gathering. Leafcutter ants don't eat the leaves they cut. Instead, they bring leaf fragments back to the nest and use them as compost for growing fungus. The ants eat the fungus, which breaks down the leaf material and produces nutritious structures that the ants harvest. Imagine the complexity of this system. Ants must find suitable leaves, cut them efficiently, transport them back to the nest, process them into small pieces, add them to the fungus garden at the right moisture and temperature, remove contaminated material, and harvest the fungus. All of this happens through division of labor and communication, with different ants specializing in different stages of the farming process. The fungus garden requires constant maintenance. If humidity drops, ants bring in water droplets. If temperature rises, ants fan the garden with their wings. If foreign fungi try to invade the garden, ants remove them and apply antimicrobial secretions from specialized glands. The ants have been farming these fungi for millions of years, and the fungi have evolved to depend on the ants just as the ants depend on the fungi. Let your mind rest gently with these images. There's no need to memorize every detail. Just let the wonder of these systems wash over you calmly. Some ants engage in a relationship with other insects called trophobiosis. They protect aphids or similar sap-feeding insects and harvest the sweet honeydew these insects produce. Ants will guard aphids from predators, carry them to better feeding locations, and even bring them into the nest at night for protection. In return, the ants gently stroke the aphids with their antennae, stimulating them to release droplets of honeydew, which the ants consume. This is sometimes called ant farming, and it's remarkably sophisticated. The ants are essentially managing herds of honeydew-producing insects, protecting their livestock and harvesting their products. Some ant species have been doing this for so long that certain aphid species have evolved to depend entirely on ant protection and can't survive without it. Harvester ants specialize in collecting seeds. They forage individually or in small groups, searching for seeds across wide areas. When seeds are found, they're carried back to the nest and stored in special chambers. The ants shell the seeds and may even prevent them from sprouting by removing the embryos. These seed stores allow harvester ant colonies to survive seasons when fresh food is scarce. The foraging range of an ant colony varies enormously by species. Some small colonies might only forage within a few meters of their nest. Large colonies might have foraging trails extending 50 meters or more. Leafcutter colonies have been documented with foraging trails over 100 meters long, connecting the nest to particularly good leaf sources. Foraging schedules also vary. Some ants forage only during the day when temperatures are moderate. Others forage primarily at night to avoid heat and predators. Desert ants often have brief foraging windows during the coolest parts of the day. Tropical ants might forage continuously, with different workers taking shifts. Many ants can learn and remember profitable foraging locations. Individual ants that have found food in a certain area will preferentially search that area on future trips. This individual memory combines with chemical trail systems to create efficient exploitation of known food sources, while still allowing some exploratory foraging to find new sources. The overall foraging success of a colony depends on many factors: the number of foragers, their search efficiency, the abundance of food in the environment, competition from other colonies, and environmental conditions like temperature and rain. Colonies continually adjust their foraging effort based on feedback about food intake and colony needs. When food is abundant, foragers may be selective, bringing back only high-quality items. When food is scarce, ants become less choosy and work harder, sending out more foragers and accepting lower-quality resources. The colony's foraging strategy is thus adaptive, responding to changing conditions. Now let's explore how ants find their way in the world. For creatures so small, navigating across what for them are vast distances presents interesting challenges. Yet ants routinely travel many meters from their nests and return precisely to the entrance, even across seemingly featureless terrain. Ants use multiple navigation strategies, often combining several methods to find their way. The simplest is chemical trail following, which we've already discussed. But many ants also navigate using other cues, particularly when foraging individually without continuous trails. One remarkable navigation method is called path integration or dead reckoning. Ants that use this method keep track of their direction and distance from the nest as they wander searching for food. They do this by monitoring their own movements continuously. When it's time to return home, they can compute the direct route back to the nest, even if their outward journey was meandering. Picture a desert ant leaving her nest on a foraging trip. The day is hot, and she needs to find food and return quickly to avoid overheating. She walks in a somewhat winding path, searching for dead insects in the sand. She turns left, walks forward, turns right, walks more, makes another turn, and so on. After traveling perhaps 30 meters in this indirect path, she finds a dead beetle. Now, instead of retracing her winding path back, she turns and walks in a straight line directly back to her nest. How does she know which direction and how far to go? She's been integrating her path all along. Ants use the sun's position as a compass reference. They have specialized photoreceptors in their compound eyes that detect the pattern of polarized light in the sky, which changes predictably with the sun's position even on cloudy days. By monitoring this celestial compass while they walk, they keep track of their heading. They measure distance using an internal step counter or by monitoring their own movement through visual flow patterns. Studies have shown that if you artificially lengthen an ant's legs, making her steps longer, she'll overshoot her nest on the return journey because she underestimates the distance traveled. Similarly, if you shorten her legs, she'll stop short of the nest. Path integration isn't perfect. Small errors accumulate over long distances, but for the distances most ants travel, it's remarkably accurate. When an ant using path integration gets close to her nest entrance, she switches to local landmark recognition to pinpoint the exact location. Landmark learning is another crucial navigation tool. Ants can learn visual features of their environment and use them to recognize locations. Near the nest entrance, ants learn the positions of rocks, plants, changes in ground texture, and other features. They can recognize these patterns from different angles and use them to home in on the nest entrance from nearby. Learning walks are a fascinating behavior, seen in many ant species. When a young ant is about to leave the nest for the first time, or when the colony has moved to a new nest location, workers perform elaborate learning walks near the entrance. The ant walks in loops and arcs, frequently turning back to look at the nest entrance, memorizing the visual scene from multiple angles and distances. After several learning walks, the ant has stored a mental map of the area near the nest entrance. She can then use this map to recognize the nest when returning from foraging trips. Different ants may learn slightly different routes and landmarks, giving the colony redundancy in navigation knowledge. Breathe gently. Let your mind visualize these tiny creatures memorizing their world, learning the positions of stones and plants, using the sun's position across the sky. Some ants can even use magnetic fields for navigation. They have magnetic particles in their bodies that allow them to detect the Earth's magnetic field and use it as an additional compass reference. This might be particularly useful on cloudy days when celestial cues are weak. For ants that forage in complex three-dimensional environments like forest canopies, navigation becomes even more challenging. Weaver ants, for example, create networks of trails across many trees. They use a combination of pheromone trails, visual landmarks and tactile cues from the vegetation structure to navigate this complex space. In dark environments like cave systems or deep inside nests, ants rely more on tactile and chemical cues. They may follow the walls of tunnels, using their antennae to detect texture changes. They orient to chemical gradients within the nest, moving toward areas with higher concentrations of certain colony-specific pheromones. Interestingly, ants can integrate information from multiple navigation systems. If one system gives unreliable information, they can weight other systems more heavily. If their path integration suggests the nest is in one direction, but visual landmarks suggest a slightly different direction, they can compromise between these cues to find their way. The robustness of ant navigation is impressive. Researchers have experimentally displaced ants during their return journey, moving them to new locations. The ants initially head in the direction indicated by their path integration system, searching for their nest. When they don't find it, they begin expanding their search, eventually using other cues to reorient themselves. Some ants create external trail systems that serve as semi-permanent navigation infrastructure. Army ants, during their raids, lay down thick pheromone trails that persist for hours. These trails develop into trunk routes with branch trails leading to different foraging areas. The trail network helps coordinate the movement of hundreds of thousands of ants, ensuring efficient flow of workers outward to hunt and inward carrying prey. Leafcutter ants maintain cleared foraging trails that can persist for years, running from the nest to profitable leaf sources. These physical trails make navigation easier for laden workers carrying heavy leaf fragments. The ants remove obstacles from the trails and even engage in road maintenance, filling in holes and leveling the surface. For long-distance navigation, some ants demonstrate surprisingly sophisticated abilities. Desert ants can navigate across featureless sand for distances equivalent to many thousands of body lengths, successfully returning to nest entrances that are just a few centimeters wide. This would be like a human walking several kilometers through a uniform environment and finding a specific spot just 10 centimeters in diameter. Navigation errors, when they occur, have consequences. An ant that gets lost may never find her way back to the nest. She'll eventually exhaust her energy reserves and die. But from the colony's perspective, losing a few foragers is acceptable. The navigation systems are good enough that most ants return successfully most of the time, and that's sufficient for colony success. Young ants and older experienced foragers differ in their navigation abilities. Older ants have more refined mental maps of the area around the nest. They know more landmarks, have more accurate path integration, and can navigate more reliably. Experience improves navigation just as it improves other ant skills. Some species show cultural transmission of route information. Experienced foragers can lead inexperienced ants along established routes through tandem running or group recruitment. The naive ants learn the route by following and can then use it independently on future trips. This allows colonies to maintain knowledge of good foraging areas across generations of workers. Let yourself rest in the wonder of this. These tiny creatures, with brains smaller than a grain of sand, solving sophisticated navigation problems, finding their way through complex environments, returning precisely to their homes after long journeys. It's remarkable and also deeply calming to contemplate. Let's turn our attention now to the nests ants build and how they maintain suitable conditions inside them. The architecture of ant nests varies tremendously across species, but all serve similar functions: protection from weather and predators, appropriate conditions for brood development, and organization of colony activities. The simplest ant nests are just small cavities in the soil or rotting wood, perhaps enlarged slightly by the ants. More complex nests are elaborate systems of chambers and tunnels, excavated by the ants over months or years. The most complex can extend meters underground, contain thousands of chambers, and be occupied continuously for decades. Let's imagine a typical underground nest of a common species, perhaps in a meadow or garden. At the surface, there might be a small mound of excavated soil with several entrance holes. Just below the surface, tunnels lead down and branch into a network. These upper tunnels connect to chambers of various sizes, each serving different purposes. Chambers near the surface are often used as nurseries in cool weather because the sun warms the soil there. When it's hot, larvae are moved to deeper, cooler chambers. Some chambers are used for storing food, particularly seeds in harvester ant nests or honeydew in ant species that tend aphids. Other chambers serve as resting places for workers during inactive periods. The queen usually occupies a chamber somewhere in the middle levels of the nest, not too deep but well protected. Workers constantly attend her, feeding her, grooming her, and carrying away her eggs to nursery chambers. The queen's chamber needs to be stable in temperature and humidity and safe from disturbances. The deepest chambers in many nests serve as refuges during extreme weather. If the surface soil freezes in winter, ants retreat to chambers below the frost line where temperatures remain stable. If the surface dries out during drought, deep chambers retain more moisture. The architecture emerges without blueprints through a process called stigmergy. Each worker ant digs according to simple rules. If you're carrying soil and detect a tunnel wall, deposit your load there. If you're in a developing chamber and the ceiling feels unstable, add support by leaving soil. Particles. If a tunnel feels too narrow, excavate more soil. As many ants follow these simple rules, complex structures emerge. Tunnels form at appropriate angles for drainage. Chambers develop at preferred sizes based on how ants move and interact within them. The overall nest architecture fits the colony's needs without any ant having a mental image of the whole structure. Take a slow breath. Picture this happening underground in darkness, each ant making small decisions that collectively create an organized living space. Some ants build more specialized structures. Weaver ants create nests by binding leaves together using silk produced by their larvae. Workers hold leaves in position while others hold larvae, using them like tubes of glue to stitch the leaves together with silk threads. The result is a compact, waterproof nest suspended in trees. Leafcutter ants excavate enormous underground nests among the largest and most complex animal structures on Earth. A mature leafcutter colony might have a nest with thousands of chambers spread across hundreds of cubic meters of soil. The central fungus gardens are kept in large chambers with careful environmental control. Smaller chambers surround them for waste disposal, storage, and housing different castes of workers. Fire ants in flood-prone areas have evolved an interesting solution to rising water. When their nest floods, the ants link their bodies together to form a living raft. The queen and brood are protected in the center of this raft, while workers on the outside form a waterproof layer. The raft drifts until it reaches dry ground, where the colony can establish a new nest. Temperature regulation within nests is crucial for brood development. Eggs, larvae, and pupae develop optimally at specific temperatures, typically between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius for most species. If temperatures stray too far from this range, development slows or stops, or the brood may die. Ants regulate nest temperature through architecture and behavior. The position of chambers at different depths allows ants to move brood to optimal temperature zones. Chambers near the surface warm quickly in morning sun. Deeper chambers stay cooler during hot afternoons. By moving brood throughout the day, workers can keep them in the right temperature range. Some species actively heat their nests. Wood ants in temperate forests build large mound nests of pine needles and other plant material. These mounds can be over a meter tall. The decomposition of plant material generates heat, like a compost pile. The ants regulate the temperature by opening or closing vents in the mound and by adding or removing material. Other ants use solar heating more directly. They position their nests under flat rocks that absorb sun heat during the day. The rock acts as a thermal mass, releasing heat slowly and keeping the nest warm even as outside temperatures drop at night. Ventilation is another important aspect of nest environment. As ants breathe, they consume oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. In a crowded nest with poor ventilation, carbon dioxide can build up to unhealthy levels. Many species create ventilation systems through nest architecture. Some ant nests have chimney-like structures where warm carbon dioxide-rich air rises and exits, while cooler, fresh air enters through other openings. This passive ventilation system works continuously without requiring active effort from the ants. Other species actively ventilate their nests by fanning with their wings. Workers position themselves at tunnel entrances and fan air through the nest. Studies of leafcutter colonies have shown that workers coordinate their fanning activity, creating directed air currents that flow through the fungus gardens, providing fresh oxygen and removing excess carbon dioxide and heat. Humidity control matters too. Brood and fungi require specific humidity levels. Too dry and eggs desiccate. Too wet and harmful molds can grow. Ants regulate humidity by bringing in water droplets during dry periods and opening tunnels for air circulation during wet periods. The location where colonies choose to build their nests reflects environmental requirements. Many species prefer areas with good drainage to prevent flooding. Others seek locations with specific sun exposure, either sunny for warmth or shaded to avoid overheating. Proximity to food sources, quality of soil for excavation, and presence of suitable nesting materials all influence nest site selection. When a colony outgrows its nest or conditions deteriorate, the ants may relocate to a new site. Nest relocation is a major undertaking involving scouting for new sites, evaluating them, reaching a collective decision, and then moving the entire colony, including queen, brood, and food stores. Scout ants explore potential new nest sites, assessing factors like cavity size, number of entrances, and location. Scouts that find good sites return to the old nest and recruit other scouts to inspect their finds. Through a process of competing recruitment, with more scouts visiting and recruiting for better sites, the colony reaches a consensus on the best available location. Once a new site is selected, the move begins. Workers carry brood, food, and even other workers to the new nest. The queen is carefully transported. The process might take hours or days depending on colony size and distance between nests. Throughout, the colony must remain coordinated and vulnerable brood must be protected. Breathe slowly and picture this. Thousands of ants streaming between two locations, each carrying something precious, working together to move their entire home. There's something deeply calming about witnessing such purposeful, organized activity. Some ants build nests in trees, creating structures called carton nests from chewed plant material mixed with ant secretions. These nests are waterproof, insulated, and suspended safely above ground predators. Chambers inside are organized similarly to underground nests, with areas for brood, food storage, and the queen. Other ants are nomadic, never building permanent nests at all. Army ants form temporary bivouacs when they need to rest and allow the queen to lay eggs. Workers link their bodies together into a living structure, creating chambers inside where the queen and brood are protected. When it's time to move, the bivouac dissolves and the colony continues its nomadic existence. Even within a single species, nest architecture can vary based on environment. Colonies in wet climates might build nests with better drainage. Colonies in extreme climates might dig deeper for thermal stability. The same genetic program for nest building expressed in different environments produces different structures optimized for local conditions. The nest is truly the heart of the colony, more than just a shelter. It's a carefully crafted environment where temperature, humidity, and airflow are regulated. It's organized space where different activities occur in appropriate locations. It's the physical manifestation of the colony's success, growing larger and more complex as the colony thrives. Let's explore now the remarkable care ants give to their young, and how those young develop from egg to adult. This aspect of colony life is central to understanding how colonies perpetuate themselves across generations of workers. The life of every ant begins as an egg laid by the queen. These eggs are tiny, usually oval and white or translucent. The queen may lay dozens of eggs per day in a large mature colony, or just a few eggs per day in a small or newly founded colony. The rate of egg laying adjusts to colony conditions, particularly food availability. Once laid, eggs don't simply wait passively to hatch. Worker ants immediately begin caring for them. Eggs are picked up gently in workers' jaws and moved to nursery chambers. Workers constantly groom the eggs with their mouth parts, likely applying antimicrobial secretions that protect against fungal growth. Eggs are also moved frequently between chambers to maintain optimal temperature and humidity. A worker might carry an egg to a warmer chamber in the morning when the sun begins heating the nest, then move it to a cooler chamber in the afternoon. This movement continues throughout the several days or weeks it takes eggs to hatch. When an egg hatches, a tiny larva emerges. Ant larvae look nothing like adult ants. They're white, legless, grub-like creatures that can barely move on their own. They're completely dependent on workers for everything: food, cleaning, temperature regulation, and protection. Workers feed larvae constantly. In species that eat liquid food like nectar, workers regurgitate droplets directly to larvae. In species that eat solid food like insects, workers chew the food into small pieces and feed it to larvae bit by bit. The larvae grow rapidly, molting their skin several times as they increase in size. The amount and type of food a larva receives can determine what caste it becomes. Larvae destined to become large soldiers are fed more and for longer periods than larvae that will become small workers. In some species, larvae destined to become queens receive special nutrition, particularly proteins, that triggers the developmental pathway toward reproductive females rather than sterile workers. This nutritional control of caste determination means the colony can adjust its worker composition based on needs. If the colony needs more soldiers, workers feed some larvae the diet that produces large ants. If the colony needs more foragers, they feed larvae the diet for medium-sized ants. The feedback between colony needs and brood rearing creates a worker population matched to environmental demands. Take a moment here. Breathe easily. Imagine the care being lavished on helpless larvae by countless workers, each adding tiny contributions that collectively nurture the next generation. Larvae in many species can communicate their hunger state to workers through chemical signals or possibly through sounds. Hungry larvae may secrete pheromones that stimulate feeding behavior in workers. Well-fed larvae produce different signals that reduce worker attention. This allows workers to direct feeding effort where it's most needed. After growing through several larval stages, each ant larva spins a cocoon in many species, or simply becomes a pupa in others. During the pupal stage, the larva undergoes metamorphosis, transforming from the grub-like larval form into the adult ant shape. This transformation takes days to weeks, depending on species and temperature. Workers continue caring for pupae just as they did for larvae, moving them to optimal locations and cleaning them regularly. In species that form cocoons, workers must help the newly transformed adult ant emerge from the cocoon. They carefully bite open one end of the cocoon and assist the new worker in pulling herself free. Newly emerged adult ants are called callows. They're pale in color and soft-bodied at first. Their exoskeleton hasn't fully hardened. Callow ants stay inside the nest for their first few days, gradually darkening and hardening. During this time, they begin performing simple tasks like caring for brood. The brood area of a colony is often the most carefully tended part of the nest. Workers maintain stable conditions there more diligently than anywhere else. Brood chambers are kept clean, with dead larvae quickly removed. Temperature and humidity are kept in narrow ranges optimal for development. Different aged brood may be kept in different areas. Eggs might be in one set of chambers, young larvae in another, older larvae in another, and pupae in yet another location. This segregation allows workers to optimize conditions for each life stage and may reduce the spread of disease through the brood. Brood production varies seasonally in many species, particularly those in temperate climates. During spring and summer, when food is abundant and temperatures are suitable, the queen lays many eggs and the colony grows rapidly. In autumn, egg-laying slows. In winter, there may be no brood at all, with the colony simply maintaining adult workers until spring returns. Tropical species often produce brood year-round, since food and favorable temperatures are continuously available. These colonies can grow very large because they never stop producing new workers. The sex of ant brood is determined in an interesting way. Fertilized eggs, where the queen's egg is combined with sperm from her stored supply, develop into females. These females will be either workers or queens depending on how they're raised. Unfertilized eggs develop into males. This system, called haplodiploidy, is common among ants, bees, and wasps. The queen controls which eggs are fertilized and thus controls the sex ratio of her offspring. Most eggs are fertilized, producing workers. At certain times of year, the colony produces reproductive individuals, new queens and males. The queen adjusts her egg fertilization behavior to produce the right mix. Males have a very different life trajectory than workers. They never work. They don't forage, don't care for brood, don't defend the colony. Their only role is reproduction. They're often larger than workers and have wings. After emerging from pupae, males stay in the nest, eating food brought by workers until the time comes for the mating flight. New queens are also produced only at certain times. They're usually larger than workers and have wings. They receive special care from workers while developing, including extra food. After emerging as adults, they also wait in the nest for the right conditions to leave on a mating flight. The timing of reproductive production is often synchronized across many colonies in an area. Environmental cues like temperature, rainfall, and day length trigger colonies to produce reproductives at similar times. This synchronization increases the chances that mating flights from different colonies will occur simultaneously, promoting genetic mixing across the population. Picture a summer evening after rain. From hundreds of nests across a meadow, winged queens and males emerge almost simultaneously. They take to the air, forming swarms where mating occurs. It's one of nature's remarkable synchronized events, coordinated across independent colonies without any communication between them. After mating, as we've mentioned earlier, males die and queens land to begin new colonies. But let's consider this from the perspective of the colony that produced them. That colony has invested significant resources in producing these reproductive individuals. Workers fed them. The queen diverted some of her egg production to make reproductives rather than workers. This represents a cost to the colony's current functioning, but it's an investment in the future. The new queens that successfully found colonies will spread the genetic lineage of their mother colony. From an evolutionary perspective, producing successful reproductives is the ultimate measure of a colony's success. A colony might have millions of workers, but if it never produces reproductives that found new colonies, its genetic line ends when the queen dies. So the colony balances investment in growth and maintenance with investment in reproduction. Young, small colonies invest almost entirely in producing workers to grow larger. Large, mature colonies shift some resources toward producing reproductives. The transition point depends on species and environmental conditions. Let your mind rest gently with these cycles of life and growth, each stage carefully tended, each individual contributing to the larger whole. The patience and care lavished on brood is one of the defining features of social insects, and it's deeply calming to contemplate. Now we'll explore how ant colonies protect themselves from the many threats they face. Defense is crucial for colony survival, and ants have evolved remarkable strategies to protect their nests, food, and most importantly, their queen and brood. Threats to ant colonies come in many forms. Predators ranging from birds and lizards to spiders and other insects hunt ants. Other ant colonies compete for resources and may raid each other's nests. Parasites and pathogens can infect and kill ants or brood. Environmental hazards like floods, fires, and extreme weather can destroy nests. The first line of defense is often the nest itself. A well-hidden or well-protected nest entrance makes the colony harder to attack. Many ants nest under rocks, inside rotting logs, or deep underground, where entrances are difficult for predators to access. Some species build multiple entrances so that if one is blocked or attacked, ants can use others to escape or mount a defense. Ants on guard duty often station themselves near nest entrances. These guards are vigilant, investigating anything that approaches. They use their antennae to check whether incoming ants are colony members or intruders. Colony members carry the colony-specific chemical odor that marks them as family. Intruders lacking this odor are immediately attacked. The colony odor comes from chemicals on the ant's cuticle, which are shared through frequent contact among nestmates. When ants groom each other or exchange food, they transfer these chemicals, homogenizing the colony scent. An ant that has been away from the nest for a long time might have a slightly different odor and could be challenged by guards until her scent is verified. When guards detect an intruder, they sound the alarm by releasing alarm pheromones. These volatile chemicals spread quickly, alerting nearby ants to danger. Ants detecting alarm pheromones become agitated and move toward the source. Within seconds, dozens or hundreds of defenders may converge on an intruder. Ant combat is fierce, Despite the small size of the combatants, ants bite with powerful mandibles, sting with venomous stingers in species that have them, or spray formic acid and other defensive chemicals. Fire ants, for example, bite to hold on and then sting repeatedly, injecting venom that causes intense pain even to large animals. Army ants defend through sheer numbers and aggression. When their column is disturbed, thousands of ants boil out, attacking anything in their path. Their coordinated assault can drive away animals much larger than themselves. Weaver ants spray formic acid from their abdomens while biting. They're extremely aggressive and work in groups to subdue intruders. Multiple ants might grab different parts of an intruder's body and pull in different directions, immobilizing it while others spray acid or bite vulnerable joints. Some ants have evolved specialized soldier castes with defensive adaptations. Leafcutter soldiers have enormous heads with powerful jaws that can deliver devastating bites. They patrol the colony's territory and guard the nest entrances. Certain trapjaw ants have mandibles that snap shut with incredible speed and force, stunning or killing attackers. Breathe slowly as we continue. There's no urgency here. We're simply observing the ways colonies protect themselves. Defense isn't always about fighting. Many ant species avoid conflict through camouflage or chemical defenses that make them unpalatable. Some ants have tough, slippery exoskeletons that make them hard to grasp or bite. Others can autotomize, deliberately breaking off their own legs to escape when grabbed. Colony-level defenses include spatial organization. Critical resources like the queen and brood are kept deep in the nest where they're hardest to reach. If the nest is attacked, workers evacuate brood and queen to safer locations. Some colonies have escape tunnels leading to emergency exits far from the main nest entrance. Certain ants practice slavery or dulosis, raiding other ant colonies to steal brood. They raise the stolen brood as workers in their own colony. This is obviously harmful to the raided colony. Species that are commonly targeted by slave-making ants have evolved counter-strategies, like aggressive defense or building harder-to-find nests. Competition between ant colonies can be intense, especially in resource-limited environments. Adjacent colonies often establish territory boundaries. These boundaries are patrolled and defended, and conflicts along borders are common. The outcome of territorial conflicts usually depends on colony size. Larger colonies can field more defenders and typically dominate. However, even large colonies must balance defense with other needs. Too many workers dedicated to fighting means fewer workers foraging or caring for brood. Colonies that allocate resources efficiently between growth, reproduction, and defense tend to be most successful. Some ant species form super colonies where multiple queens and their nests are interconnected, and workers move freely between nests without aggression. These super colonies can extend across vast areas, containing millions or billions of workers. They outcompete other ant species through sheer numbers and coordinated defense of their territory. The Argentine ant, native to South America but now invasive in many parts of the world, forms such super colonies. A single super colony can stretch along hundreds of kilometers of coastline. These ants dominate the environments they invade, excluding native ant species through aggressive competition. Disease is another major threat. Living in crowded conditions with many individuals in close contact, ant colonies could be vulnerable to rapid disease spread. But ants have evolved sophisticated defenses against pathogens. Social immunity is the collective disease defense of the colony. Ants practice intense grooming, both of themselves and each other. This removes fungal spores, bacteria, and parasites before they can establish infections. Workers are particularly diligent about grooming the queen and brood. Ants also use chemical defenses against pathogens. The formic acid that many species use as a defensive chemical also has antimicrobial properties. Ants spread it over their bodies and throughout the nest, creating an environment hostile to many pathogens. Some ants actually pick up antimicrobial bacteria from their environment and cultivate them on their bodies or in their nests. These beneficial bacteria produce antibiotics that suppress harmful pathogens. Leafcutter ants, for example, have bacteria on their bodies that produce antibiotics specifically targeting parasitic fungi that attack their fungus gardens. Behavioral defenses against disease include waste management. Dead ants are quickly removed from the nest and deposited in refuse piles at a distance. This prevents pathogens from decomposing corpses from spreading to living ants. Some species even have specialized workers that handle dead ants and waste, keeping these potentially contaminated individuals away from the rest of the colony. If an ant becomes infected with a pathogen, she may remove herself from the colony voluntarily, a behavior called prophylactic emigration. The sick ant leaves the nest and doesn't return, sacrificing herself to prevent spreading disease to her sisters. This behavior benefits the colony, even though it costs the individual her life. Let yourself breathe deeply and slowly. These defense mechanisms, from physical combat to disease prevention, all work together to protect the colony as a living system. Environmental hazards require different defensive responses. Flooding can destroy underground nests, but many ants can survive by moving to higher ground or forming rafts. Fire ants excel at this, as mentioned earlier, forming living rafts that float until reaching safety. Fires are common in some ecosystems, and ants living there have adaptations to survive. Some flee deep underground, where they're protected by soil. Others have nest architecture that shields them from heat. Many simply evacuate with their brood and queen, returning to rebuild after the fire passes. Extreme cold in winter forces ants in temperate regions to enter dormancy. They retreat to deep chambers below the frost line and enter a state of reduced metabolism. They survive on stored body fat and food reserves until spring. The colony doesn't actively defend during this time, but survives through preparation and physiological tolerance. Human impacts present novel challenges that ants haven't evolved specific defenses against. Pesticides, habitat destruction, and invasive species introduced by humans all threaten native ant populations. Some species adapt to human-modified environments, even thriving in cities and agricultural areas. Others decline when their natural habitats are destroyed. Despite these various threats, successful colonies persist for years or decades through their collective defense strategies. The redundancy of having many workers means the loss of some individuals doesn't threaten the colony. The queen, well protected deep in the nest, can continue producing new workers to replace losses. Colony defense exemplifies the strength of collective action. No individual ant could defeat many of the threats colonies face, but acting together, responding to alarm signals, coordinating their efforts through chemical communication, thousands of tiny ants can protect their home against much larger and more powerful threats. Let's now follow the complete life cycle of an ant colony, from founding through maturity to eventual decline and death. Understanding this cycle gives us perspective on how these remarkable societies exist across time. The story begins with a single ant, a young queen on her mating flight. She's one of perhaps hundreds of reproductive females produced by her mother colony. Along with her sisters and males from many colonies, She flies into the air on a day when weather conditions are just right. The mating flight is brief but crucial. Queens mate with one or more males while flying. They store the sperm in a special organ called the spermatheca, where it will remain viable for years, often for the queen's entire life. This single mating flight provides all the sperm the queen will ever need to produce millions of fertilized eggs. After mating, the queen lands and immediately breaks off her wings. She no longer needs them, and they would only hinder her next task, finding a suitable place to start a colony. She searches for a protected spot, perhaps a small cavity under a rock, a crack in soil, or a hollow in a dead plant stem. Once she finds a suitable location, the queen seals herself inside. She's now completely alone, isolated from the outside world. This is one of the most vulnerable periods in a colony's life. The queen has no workers to help her, no food stores, no established nest. Everything depends on her surviving until her first workers mature. The queen begins laying eggs, usually just a few at first. She doesn't leave to find food. Instead, she metabolizes her own flight muscles and fat reserves to sustain herself and produce eggs. Her body literally consumes itself to fuel the next generation. In some species, the queen also eats some of her own eggs to recycle nutrients. Take a slow, deep breath. Picture this single ant alone in darkness, investing everything in the hope that her offspring will survive. The eggs hatch into larvae, and the queen feeds them with saliva and trophic eggs, special unfertilized eggs produced just for feeding. The first brood is small, perhaps only a few larvae, and they don't receive abundant nutrition. They develop into small workers called nanitic workers that are undersized compared to workers in mature colonies. But despite their small size, these first workers are crucial. Once they mature, they begin the essential work of the colony. They excavate nest chambers, forage for food, and care for subsequent brood. The queen can now focus on laying eggs while her workers provision the colony. With workers bringing in food, the queen can produce more eggs and feed them better. The next generation of workers is larger and more robust. The colony enters a growth phase. More workers mean more foraging capacity, which means more food, which means the queen can produce even more workers. The colony grows exponentially during favorable conditions. In the first year, a colony might grow from one ant to a few dozen or 100 workers, depending on species and conditions. The nest expands as workers dig new chambers and tunnels. The workers develop the colony odor that will mark all colony members as family. Growth continues through subsequent years. Annual growth rate depends on food availability, climate, and species characteristics. A colony in a favorable environment with abundant food might grow to thousands of workers within a few years. A colony in a harsh environment might take longer to reach the same size. Eventually, the colony reaches maturity. In biological terms, maturity means the colony begins investing resources in reproduction, rather than putting everything into growth. The queen shifts some of her egg production toward reproductive individuals, new queens and males, rather than just workers. The age at which a colony reaches maturity varies greatly among species. Small species with simple colonies might mature in a single year. Large species with complex colonies might take 5 to 10 years or longer. Once mature, colonies typically produce reproductives every year during the appropriate season. Mature colonies often reach a stable size, where worker production balances worker mortality. The colony isn't growing rapidly anymore, but it maintains a large workforce and produces reproductives annually. This stable phase can last for many years, depending on the queen's lifespan. Queen longevity varies dramatically among ant species. Some queens live only a year or two. Others can live for decades. The record is held by a queen of the species Lasius niger, documented to have lived 28 years. During her lifetime, she would have produced millions of offspring. Worker longevity is much shorter. In most species, workers live for months, though some live only weeks, and others can survive for a year or more. The constant turnover of workers means the colony's workforce is always refreshing, with young workers replacing older ones that die. The colony's age structure affects its functioning. A young colony with mostly young workers might be more exploratory and risk-tolerant. An older colony with a mix of age classes has experienced workers who have learned efficient routes and techniques, making the colony more productive. As the queen ages, her egg production may eventually decline. When this happens, the colony's worker population starts to shrink. Fewer new workers are produced, and mortality gradually reduces the workforce. The colony enters a senescent phase. Breathe gently. Everything has its cycle, including ant colonies. This decline is natural, part of the pattern of life. The eventual fate of colonies varies. In species with single queens, when the queen dies, the colony usually dies with her. Without a queen to produce new workers, the existing workers gradually die off over weeks or months. The nest is eventually abandoned or taken over by a new colony. Some species can produce new queens from within the colony to replace an aging or dead queen. Workers might rear a few larvae as queens rather than workers. If successful, the colony continues with a new queen, potentially extending the colony's life indefinitely. In species with multiple queens, polygynous species, the death of one queen doesn't end the colony. Other queens continue producing workers and the colony carries on. Some polygynous colonies have been documented persisting for decades as new queens are added and old ones die. Supercolonies take this even further. With many queens across many interconnected nests, the colony at a large scale is nearly immortal. Individual nests may be founded and abandoned, queens may die and be replaced, but the supercolony as a whole persists indefinitely, as long as conditions remain favorable. The genetic legacy of a successful colony extends through the reproductive individuals it produces. A queen that lives 20 years and produces hundreds of daughter queens who successfully found their own colonies has tremendous genetic success. Her genes spread through the population, perhaps eventually contributing to many thousands of colonies across a wide area. From an evolutionary perspective, this is what matters. Individual ants are temporary vehicles for genes. The colony is the reproductive unit that either succeeds or fails at passing genes to the next generation. Natural selection acts on colony-level traits like foraging efficiency, defense capability, and growth rate, favoring colonies with characteristics that lead to successful reproduction. Colony founding success rates are typically very low. Of hundreds of queens leaving on a mating flight, perhaps only a handful will successfully found colonies that reach maturity and produce their own reproductives. Most founding queens die from predation, starvation, disease, or failure to find suitable nest sites, but those that do succeed can have enormous impact. One successful founding queen can lead to a colony of millions of individuals occupying large territories and significantly affecting their ecosystem. Her genetic contribution to the next generation far outweighs that of her many sisters who failed to found successful colonies. This creates strong selective pressure for traits that increase founding success and colony growth. Queens with slightly better fat reserves, slightly better nest site selection, or slightly better first worker survival have enormous advantage. These traits accumulate through evolution, refining the colony life cycle. The cycle continues, generation after generation. Each year, new queens attempt to found colonies. Most fail, but some succeed. Successful colonies grow, reach maturity, and produce the next generation of reproductive ants. The pattern repeats endlessly, a cycle of life operating at the colony level. Ant colonies don't exist in isolation. They're embedded in ecosystems, interacting with countless other species and shaping the environments they inhabit. Let's explore the many ecological roles that ant colonies play. One of the most important roles is soil modification. Ants excavating nests move enormous amounts of soil. One estimate suggests that ants globally move as much soil as earthworms. In some ecosystems, particularly in dry areas where earthworms are scarce, ants are the primary animals aerating and mixing soil. As ants dig tunnels and chambers, they bring deep soil to the surface and incorporate surface material downward. This mixing distributes nutrients and organic matter through the soil profile. The tunnels themselves improve soil structure, creating channels for water infiltration and air circulation. Plant roots can follow these tunnels, reaching deeper into the soil. Ant nests concentrate organic matter and nutrients. Food brought back to the nest, waste produced by the colony, and eventually the bodies of dead ants all add nutrients to the soil in and around the nest. The area around large ant nests often has noticeably richer soil than surrounding areas, sometimes visible as slightly different plant growth. Harvester ants collecting seeds play a role in seed dispersal and plant community composition. They gather seeds from plants across wide areas and concentrate them in their nests. Some seeds are eaten, but others are lost during transport or stored but never consumed. These lost seeds may germinate, sometimes far from the parent plant, leading to plant dispersal. Interestingly, many plant species have evolved specifically to encourage ant dispersal of their seeds. These plants produce seeds with special nutrient-rich attachments called eleosomes. Ants collect these seeds for the eleosomes, carry them to their nests, remove and eat the eleosomes, and then discard the seeds, often in nutrient-rich waste piles. The seeds germinate in these favorable locations, benefiting from both dispersal and nutrient enhancement. Let yourself breathe slowly, picturing these interactions between ants and plants, each shaping the other's success. Ants are major predators in many ecosystems. Collectively, ant colonies consume enormous numbers of other insects and small invertebrates. Some estimates suggest ants may consume more insect biomass than all spiders combined. This predation affects population dynamics of prey species and can influence community composition. Different ant species specialize in hunting different prey or hunting in different ways, creating a diversity of predatory impacts. Army ants conduct mass raids that catch slow-moving or colonial prey. Other ants hunt individually, catching small active prey. Some specialize in termites, some in other insects' larvae, some in whatever is available. This predation provides ecosystem services in agricultural settings. Ants can help control pest insects, reducing crop damage. In some traditional farming systems, farmers have deliberately encouraged ants that prey on crop pests, managing ant populations as a form of biological control. Ants also serve as prey for many animals. Birds, lizards, amphibians, small mammals, and many invertebrates eat ants. Some animals specialize in eating ants, like anteaters, pangolins, and certain woodpeckers. The enormous biomass of ants in most ecosystems makes them a crucial food source, supporting these ant-eating specialists. The relationship between ants and aphids, which we touched on earlier, affects plant communities. By protecting aphids from predators, ants allow aphid populations to grow larger than they otherwise would. Aphids feeding on plants can reduce plant growth and reproduction, so ant-aphid partnerships indirectly affect plant fitness and distribution. However, the relationship is complex. The honeydew that aphids provide to ants is mostly sugar and contains little nitrogen. Ants in such relationships often supplement their diet by preying on other insects, which they feed to their larvae for protein. So these ants may actually reduce total insect herbivory, even while supporting aphid populations. Pollination is another service some ants provide, though they're generally less important pollinators than bees or flies. Ants visiting flowers for nectar can transfer pollen, and in certain plant species, ants are significant or even primary pollinators. However, many flowers have features that exclude ants, perhaps because ants often don't fly and thus provide more limited pollination service than flying insects. Fungus farming ants, like leafcutters, have profound ecosystem impacts. A large leafcutter colony can defoliate small trees and can significantly affect forest composition by selective feeding on certain plant species. The ant's preferences shape which plants thrive. Plants that taste bad to leafcutters or have tough leaves have advantages in areas with many leafcutter colonies. The fungus gardens in leafcutter nests are also important. When abandoned, these gardens decompose, releasing nutrients and creating nutrient hotspots in the soil. The fungal species that ants cultivate exist nowhere else in nature. They're completely dependent on the ants, making this a highly co-evolved mutualism. Some ants disperse fungal spores or other microorganisms on their bodies as they move through their environment. This can affect the distribution and diversity of soil microbes. The antimicrobial bacteria that some ants cultivate might also affect soil microbial communities around their nests. Ant nests provide habitat for many other organisms. Hundreds of species of beetles, flies, mites, and other arthropods live specifically in ant nests, some nowhere else. These myrmecophiles, ant lovers, have evolved various strategies to coexist with ants: chemical camouflage, mimicry, evasive behaviors, or appeasement behaviors. Some nest guests are parasites stealing food or preying on brood. Others are commensals, benefiting from the nest's shelter and controlled environment without harming the ants. A few are mutualists, providing services like grooming or waste removal. This community of nest guests adds to overall ecosystem biodiversity. Breathe easily and picture this hidden world. Not just ants, but entire communities living in and around ant colonies, each species finding its niche, all interconnected. Ants also influence larger animals' behavior and distribution. Many bird species use ants for anting, where they allow ants to crawl on their feathers or actively apply ants to their plumage. The formic acid and other chemicals from ants may help control feather parasites. Some birds build nests near aggressive ant colonies, perhaps gaining protection from predators deterred by the ants. In tropical ecosystems, some plants provide hollow thorns or stems where ants nest, and nectar for the ants to eat. In return, the ants aggressively defend the plant from herbivores and sometimes even clear competing vegetation from around their host plant. These ant-plant mutualisms are sophisticated relationships where both partners have adapted specifically to the partnership. The ecological impact of invasive ant species shows how important ants are in ecosystems. When a non-native ant species becomes invasive, it can dramatically alter community structure. Invasive ants often outcompete and displace native ants. They may prey excessively on native invertebrates, change seed dispersal patterns, disrupt pollination, and affect many other ecosystem processes. The Argentine ant, red imported fire ant, and yellow crazy ant are examples of invasive species causing substantial ecological disruption in areas where they've been introduced. Their success often comes from forming super colonies that eliminate typical colony-level competition, allowing them to reach extraordinary densities and dominate their environments. Climate change is affecting ant communities. As temperatures warm, some ant species are expanding their ranges toward the poles or to higher elevations. Others are declining as their preferred climates shift faster than they can migrate. Changes in precipitation patterns affect species adapted to specific moisture regimes. These shifts in ant communities will cascade through ecosystems as ants' many ecological roles are altered. Ants are often used as indicators of ecosystem health. Their abundance, diversity, and community composition reflect environmental conditions. Monitoring ant communities can reveal habitat degradation, pollution, or other disturbances. Conservation efforts sometimes focus on protecting ant diversity as a proxy for overall invertebrate biodiversity. The diversity of ants globally is staggering. Over 12,000 described species, with many more likely still undiscovered. Each species has its particular ecological role, its unique adaptations, its specific interactions with other organisms. Together, they form a major component of terrestrial ecosystems, processing nutrients, dispersing seeds, consuming prey, providing food, creating habitat, and modifying landscapes. Let's explore now the evolutionary history of ants and the remarkable diversity this has produced. Understanding how ants evolved and diversified helps us appreciate why they're so successful and varied. Ants evolved from wasp-like ancestors approximately 140 to 168 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period. The earliest ants were likely predatory, solitary, or primitively social, and quite different from modern ants. Fossils from this period show insects with both wasp-like and ant-like features, representing transitional forms. The key evolutionary innovation that led to ants was the development of a worker caste, sterile females specialized for colony tasks rather than reproduction. This division between reproductive queens and non-reproductive workers allowed labor specialization and the evolution of complex social organization. Early ant evolution occurred alongside the rise of flowering plants. As flowering plants diversified and spread across the continents, they created new ecological opportunities that ants exploited. The parallel radiation of ants and flowering plants may have been mutually influential, with ants dispersing plant seeds and pollinating flowers, while plants provided ants with food and nesting sites. By about 100 million years ago, ants had become abundant and diverse. Fossil sites from this period preserve ants in amazing detail in amber, fossilized tree resin. These ancient ants show that many modern ant traits evolved quite early, including various worker castes, chemical communication, and social organization. The extinction event that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago affected ants relatively little. Being small, living underground, and having food storage probably helped ants survive when many other organisms perished. In the aftermath of this extinction, ants expanded and diversified further, occupying ecological roles left vacant by extinct species. Over tens of millions of years, ants adapted to virtually every terrestrial habitat. Different lineages evolved specialized lifestyles: seed harvesting, fungus farming, nomadic predation, aphid tending, and many others. Each major ant subfamily shows distinctive characteristics reflecting their evolutionary history. Let's breathe slowly for a moment and contemplate deep time. Over 100 million years of ant evolution, countless generations, countless colonies, slowly accumulating small changes that produced the diversity we see today. Anatomical diversity among ants is impressive despite their fairly consistent basic body plan. All ants have 6 legs, 3 body segments, and antennae. But within this framework, enormous variation exists. Some ants are barely a millimeter long, others exceed 2 centimeters. Some have tiny heads, others have heads almost as large as their entire bodies. Mandible diversity is particularly striking. Some ants have simple mandibles for general purposes. Trap-jaw ants have spring-loaded mandibles that snap shut with among the fastest movements in the animal kingdom, creating forces hundreds of times the ant's body weight. Leafcutter ants have sharp, vibrating mandibles that work like scissors to cut through tough plant material. Army ant soldiers have enormous curved mandibles specialized for defense. Stinger evolution shows interesting patterns. The ant stinger evolved from an egg-laying organ, ovipositor, in ancestral wasps. In ants, the queen lays eggs from a different opening, freeing the modified ovipositor to function purely as a defensive weapon. Many ant lineages have lost the stinger, compensating with powerful bites or chemical defenses. Vision varies widely among ants. Subterranean species may have tiny eyes or no eyes at all, navigating entirely by touch and smell. Diurnal, day-active hunters like bulldog ants have large eyes with excellent vision, using sight to pursue prey. Nocturnal species often have large eyes, adapted for seeing in low light. Chemical communication systems have diversified extensively. While all ants use pheromones, different species use different chemical compounds, different glands for producing them, and different combinations of signals. The chemical communication system of one ant species may be completely incomprehensible to another species, like different languages. Social organization varies from primitive to highly advanced. Some species have small colonies with a few dozen workers, where any worker can potentially become a queen if the current queen dies. Others have vast colonies with millions of workers and complex caste systems where workers are irreversibly sterile. The number of queens per colony ranges from 1, monogeny, to many, polygyny. Some species have multiple functional queens in a single nest, cooperating in egg production. Others have supercolonies with thousands of queens across interconnected nests. The evolutionary drivers of these different strategies involve trade-offs between queens' individual reproduction and colony-level success. Life history strategies vary enormously. Some species are R-selected, producing many small colonies that grow quickly but don't survive long. Others are K-selected, producing few colonies that grow slowly but can persist for decades. Different strategies succeed in different environments. Invasive ant species tend toward R-selected traits: rapid reproduction, wide dietary tolerance, ability to colonize disturbed habitats, and sometimes the ability to form supercolonies, eliminating intraspecific competition. These traits make them successful colonizers, but are actually unusual among ants globally. Symbiotic relationships with other organisms have evolved repeatedly in different ant lineages. Multiple ant groups have independently evolved fungus farming. Different groups have evolved relationships with their sap-feeding insects. Some ants have mutualistic relationships with specific bacteria. These convergent evolution patterns show that certain ecological strategies are particularly successful for ants. Parasitic ant species represent interesting evolutionary pathways. Some ants have lost the worker caste entirely and can only reproduce by infiltrating other ants' colonies. The parasite queen kills or subdues the host queen, then uses the host workers to raise her own offspring. This extreme lifestyle requires sophisticated chemical mimicry and manipulation. Slave-making ants represent another parasitic strategy. These species raid other colonies, stealing pupae that will emerge as workers. The stolen workers perform colony tasks for their captors, who may have lost the ability to forage or care for brood themselves. This strategy has evolved multiple times in different ant lineages. Geographic variation within species is common. An ant species occurring across a broad range may have different morphology, behavior, or genetics in different populations. This variation is the raw material for future speciation, and indeed, many ant species complexes are being discovered to actually consist of multiple cryptic species that look nearly identical but are genetically distinct. Island populations often evolve unique characteristics. Island ants may become larger or smaller than mainland relatives, develop different colony structures, or lose certain behaviors. These island forms demonstrate how quickly ant evolution can proceed when populations are isolated. Climate has strongly influenced ant biogeography. Ant diversity is highest in warm regions, particularly tropical rainforests. As one moves toward the poles, ant diversity decreases. This reflects both historical patterns of where ants evolved and diversified, and physiological constraints. Ants are ectotherms and thus temperature sensitive. However, some ants have adapted to cold environments. Species in boreal forests, mountains, and even tundra have evolved cold tolerance, allowing them to survive long winters. These northern ants often have life cycles adapted to short summers, with most of the year spent in dormancy. Desert ants show fascinating heat adaptations. Some species forage during the hottest parts of the day, when other animals seek shade, reducing competition. These ants have long legs that elevate their bodies above the burning sand surface and can tolerate body temperatures that would kill most insects. They forage frantically during brief windows when they can tolerate the heat, then retreat to their nests. Aquatic and semi-aquatic ants exist, though they're unusual. Some species nest in waterlogged wood or soil. A few can forage underwater for brief periods. These ants show specialized morphological and behavioral adaptations for dealing with water. Take a gentle breath and picture the breadth of ant diversity. Desert specialists enduring scorching heat, cold-adapted species surviving Arctic conditions, aquatic forms in waterlogged habitats, parasites infiltrating other colonies, farmers cultivating fungi, hunters forming massive raids, all evolved from common ancestors, all sharing the basic ant body plan and social lifestyle, yet each uniquely adapted to their particular ecological niche. Genetic studies are revealing ant evolutionary relationships in increasing detail. Molecular phylogenies show which groups are most closely related when different lineages diverged and how certain traits evolved. These studies sometimes overturn classifications based on morphology, revealing that similar appearance can result from convergent evolution rather than close relationship. The pace of ant evolution varies. Some lineages have remained relatively unchanged for millions of years, representing stable, successful strategies. Other lineages have diversified rapidly, producing many species in relatively short time periods. These radiations often correlate with ecological opportunity, invasion of new habitats, evolution of new food sources, or escape from competitors and predators. Looking forward, ant evolution continues. Humans are creating novel selective pressures through habitat modification, climate change, and species introductions. Some ant species will adapt and thrive in human-modified landscapes. Others will decline or go extinct. New species will emerge over evolutionary time. The story of ant evolution is ongoing. Let's explore the fascinating question of ant intelligence. Individual ants have tiny brains, yet colonies accomplish remarkable feats of problem-solving. Understanding this apparent paradox reveals insights into collective intelligence and distributed cognition. An individual ant's brain contains about 250,000 neurons. For comparison, a human brain has about 86 billion neurons. With such a small brain, an individual ant's cognitive capabilities are limited. She can't engage in abstract reasoning, can't imagine the future, can't understand the overall colony structure. Yet colonies solve complex problems. They find efficient routes to food, sources. They allocate workers optimally among tasks. They adapt to changing conditions. They build elaborate structures. They make what appear to be intelligent collective decisions. This is colony-level intelligence emerging from interactions among many simple individuals. The key insight is that complex adaptive behavior doesn't require complex individuals. It can emerge from simple rules followed by many agents interacting in a structured environment. This principle appears throughout nature and has inspired computational approaches like swarm intelligence and collective robotics. Let's consider path optimization, which we touched on earlier. Individual ants laying and following pheromone trails don't know they're solving an optimization problem. Each ant simply follows local rules. Lay pheromone when carrying food. Follow stronger pheromone trails when searching for food. But these simple rules create a positive feedback loop. Shorter paths accumulate more pheromone because more ants travel them per unit time. Stronger pheromone attracts more ants. The system quickly converges on the shortest path without any ant measuring distances or comparing routes. This emergent problem-solving has practical applications. Ant colony optimization algorithms, inspired by this behavior, solve complex scheduling and routing problems in telecommunications, logistics, and other fields. The algorithms use virtual ants, following similar simple rules to find good solutions to problems that would be computationally expensive to solve otherwise. Task allocation represents another form of colony intelligence. Without central coordination, the colony adjusts how many workers do each task based on colony needs. This happens through response thresholds and feedback, as we discussed earlier, but let's consider it from an intelligence perspective. The colony acts as if it knows how many workers each task needs and allocates accordingly. Of course, the colony doesn't know anything consciously, but the distributed system of individual responses to task-related stimuli produces appropriate allocation. It's a form of distributed cognition, where information processing happens across many individuals rather than in a central brain. Decision-making during nest site selection shows sophisticated collective choice. When a colony needs to move to a new nest, scout ants explore potential sites. Each scout assesses the site she finds based on criteria like cavity size, entrance characteristics, and location. She returns to the old nest and recruits other scouts to her discovery. Multiple sites might be found. Scouts visiting each site return and recruit. Sites are evaluated by many scouts. Higher quality sites receive more recruitment because scouts visiting good sites recruit more enthusiastically and persistently. Eventually, recruitment to the best site overwhelms recruitment to inferior sites. The colony has compared options and chosen the best available nest site without any scout ant knowing about all the options or comparing them directly. The collective decision emerges from individual assessments and competitive recruitment. It's analogous to voting or consensus building in human groups, but achieved without language or conscious deliberation. Breathe slowly and consider this. A form of collective decision-making that achieves good outcomes through distributed evaluation and feedback, without requiring centralized information processing or conscious awareness. Experimental manipulations of ant colonies have revealed the robustness of their collective problem-solving. If you block an established foraging route, ants quickly find an alternative. If you remove a large fraction of workers, the colony adjusts task allocation to compensate. If you change environmental conditions, foraging activity adapts. These responses aren't programmed specifically. Instead, they emerge from the colony's general organizational principles. The system is inherently adaptive because it responds to local conditions and uses feedback to adjust behavior. Some ant behaviors appear remarkably sophisticated and raise questions about learning and memory. Individual ants can learn efficient routes to food sources and remember them over days. They can learn to associate certain cues with food and use this learned association to forage more effectively. This individual learning scales up to colony-level memory. If a colony has successfully exploited a particular food source, ants learn routes to that location. Even after the food is gone, ants may continue to check that location periodically based on past success. The colony remembers good foraging locations through the distributed memories of its individual members. Ants can also learn socially. Naive ants following experienced ants learn foraging routes. This social transmission of information allows colonies to maintain knowledge across worker generations. Even though individual workers live only months, the colony retains knowledge of good foraging territories, efficient routes, and reliable resources. Problem-solving in novel situations demonstrates cognitive flexibility. If you present ants with a challenge they wouldn't naturally encounter, say a bridge that must be crossed to reach food, they can often solve it through trial and error. Individual ants explore randomly, and successful solutions, ants that cross the bridge, lay pheromone trails that guide others. More impressively, colonies can adjust their behavior to exploit new opportunities. If a novel food source appears, some ants will discover it, and if it's valuable, recruitment will direct colony effort toward exploiting it. The colony doesn't need to have prior experience with every possible food type. The general foraging system handles novelty. Cooperative problem-solving emerges when tasks require multiple ants. Moving large food items requires coordinated pulling. Multiple ants grabbing the same item will eventually align their pulling directions through biomechanical feedback. When they all pull the same direction, the object moves most easily, reinforcing that pulling direction. Some ants construct bridges from their own bodies to cross gaps. Individual ants grasp each other and extend across obstacles, allowing colony mates to cross their bodies. The bridge structure emerges from simple rules about when to join the bridge and when to cross it, producing structures adapted to gap size and traffic level. Army ant bivouacs. The temporary nests formed from ants' bodies are self-assembling structures. Each ant follows simple attachment rules based on local cues. The result is a three-dimensional structure with appropriate internal chambers and proper spacing for air circulation. No ant has a blueprint. The structure emerges from distributed building behaviors. Nest excavation represents another form of collective construction. The beautiful, organized architecture of ant nests emerges from simple behavioral rules. Dig where soil is easy to excavate. Deposit removed soil in certain locations. Smooth and reinforced tunnel walls. Thousands of ants, each making small local decisions, collectively create elaborate structures. Let your breathing slow and consider the beauty of this. Complex order emerging from simplicity. Intelligence arising from the interaction of many simple parts. Problems solved without solvers who understand the problem. Comparing ant colony intelligence to other forms of intelligence raises interesting questions. It's clearly different from vertebrate intelligence, which relies on centralized neural processing. It's more like the intelligence of neural networks or cellular automata, where pattern emerges from local interactions. Some researchers argue that ant colonies are cognitive agents, entities that sense their environment, process information, and make decisions. The colony as a whole has capabilities that no individual ant possesses and responds adaptively to its environment in ways that suggest goal-directed behavior. Others caution against anthropomorphizing or overstating ant cognitive abilities. Ant colony behavior, however impressive, results from evolved instinct and simple feedback loops, not understanding or planning in any meaningful sense. Perhaps the most accurate view is that colony intelligence is real, but different from human intelligence. It solves problems, processes information, and adapts to conditions. But it does so through distributed processes rather than centralized cognition, through evolved algorithms rather than learning and reasoning, through emergent patterns rather than deliberate planning. This distributed intelligence has advantages. It's robust, no single point of failure. It's scalable. Adding more ants increases processing power. It's adaptive. Feedback naturally adjusts behavior to conditions. These advantages explain why this form of organization has been so successful for ants. Understanding ant colony intelligence informs fields beyond biology. Computer science, robotics, organizational management, and economics all draw insights from how ant colonies solve problems without centralized control. The principles of self-organization, positive feedback, and distributed processing appear in many successful complex systems. Throughout human history, we've been aware of ants. They appear in our homes, our gardens, our crops. They've inspired fables and proverbs. They've been pests and allies. Let's explore the many ways ants and humans interact. In many cultures, ants symbolize industriousness and cooperation. The famous Aesop fable of the ant and the grasshopper teaches the value of preparing for future needs. Proverbs from various cultures praise the ant's diligence and organization. This recognition of ant work ethic appears globally, suggesting these behaviors are universally observable and admirable. Traditional ecological knowledge in many societies includes detailed understanding of local ant species. Indigenous peoples have known which ants are edible, which have medicinal properties, which signal weather changes, and which indicate soil quality. This knowledge accumulated over generations represents sophisticated practical entomology. Some ants are consumed as food. In many parts of the world, certain ant species are collected and eaten often as seasonal delicacies. Honey pot ants, which store sweet liquid in their swollen abdomens, are eaten by indigenous Australians. Leafcutter queens are roasted and eaten in parts of South America. Weaver ant larvae and pupae are consumed in Southeast Asia. These traditions are nutritionally sound. Ants provide protein, fats, and various nutrients. In some cases, ant consumption represents a sustainable harvest of wild protein. However, commercial exploitation of edible ants raises conservation concerns in some regions. Agricultural impacts of ants are mixed. Many ants provide services to agriculture, predating pest insects, aerating soil, dispersing seeds. Certain ant species are deliberately conserved in agricultural systems for pest control. For example, weaver ants are encouraged in citrus groves in some Asian countries, where they control caterpillars and other pests. However, other ants are themselves agricultural pests. Harvester ants can significantly reduce crop seed yields. Fire ants damage crops and attack livestock. Leaf-cutting ants can defoliate fruit trees and crops. The balance of beneficial versus harmful effects varies by ant species, crop type, and management practices. Aphid-tending ants indirectly harm crops by protecting aphids, which feed on plant sap and can transmit plant diseases. The honeydew that ants harvest from aphids supports the ants but reduces crop productivity. Managing these ant-aphid relationships is part of integrated pest management in many agricultural systems. Ants in urban environments often conflict with humans. Many species readily colonize buildings, seeking food and shelter. While most house-invading ants are harmless nuisances, some can damage structures. Carpenter ants, for instance, excavate wood for nesting, potentially weakening structural timbers. Fire ants in urban areas pose health risks because their stings are painful and can cause severe allergic reactions in sensitive individuals. Managing fire ant populations in parks, lawns, and other public spaces is a significant pest control challenge in affected regions. Invasive ant species create substantial economic and ecological problems. The economic impacts of invasive ants through crop damage, infrastructure damage, and control costs run into billions of dollars globally. The red imported fire ant alone costs the US economy billions annually in control efforts and damage. Breathe gently as we continue. These interactions between ants and humans are part of sharing the planet with countless other species, each pursuing its own survival. Scientific study of ants has a long history. Naturalists have been observing and documenting ant behavior for centuries. Modern myrmecology, the study of ants, has revealed extraordinary details about their biology, ecology, and evolution. Ants have become model organisms for studying social behavior, chemical communication, and collective intelligence. The study of ants has contributed to broader scientific understanding. Research on ant navigation has informed understanding of animal orientation generally. Studies of ant foraging have contributed to optimization theory. Investigations of ant colony organization have influenced thinking about self-organization and emergence in complex systems. Ants are indicators of environmental health. Because different ant species prefer different habitat conditions, ant community composition reflects environmental quality. Monitoring ant diversity and abundance can reveal habitat degradation, pollution effects, or recovery from disturbance. This makes ants valuable for ecological assessment and conservation planning. Conservation of ant diversity is increasingly recognized as important. While common ant species are rarely threatened, specialist species with narrow habitat requirements face extinction risk from habitat loss. Some rare ant species are already extinct or critically endangered. Protecting ant diversity means protecting the habitats they depend on. Some ant species have become conservation concerns themselves as invasive species. Managing invasive ants to protect native biodiversity is challenging. Eradication is sometimes possible on small islands, but difficult or impossible across large areas. Control efforts must balance reducing invasive ant impacts with minimizing harm to other species. Biomimicry, learning from nature to solve human problems, has drawn inspiration from ants. Ant colony optimization algorithms mentioned earlier are used in logistics, telecommunications, and other fields. Ant-inspired robotics explores how simple robots following simple rules can accomplish complex tasks through cooperation. The chemical communication systems of ants have inspired research into chemical signaling and information processing. Understanding how ants synthesize, detect, and respond to pheromones has applications in developing pest control methods, designing chemical sensors, and understanding communication systems generally. Ant architecture has inspired human building design. The ventilation systems of termite mounds — termites are related to ants and have similar colonial lifestyles — have inspired passive cooling designs for buildings. The efficient structural designs of ant nests have informed thinking about minimal material structures. In popular culture, ants appear in films, books, and as pets. Ant farms, transparent enclosures allowing observation of ant tunneling and colony activity, have introduced many people to ant biology. While commercial ant farms often keep species unsuited to captivity, when done properly, ant keeping can be educational and entertaining. Citizen science involving ants is growing. Projects where people report ant sightings, collect distribution data, or participate in ant surveys contribute to scientific understanding of ant distributions and responses to environmental change. These projects also increase public awareness of ant diversity and ecology. Ethical considerations arise in our interactions with ants. As social organisms with complex behaviors, some argue ants deserve consideration beyond typical attitudes toward insects. Questions about whether ants can suffer, whether colonies should be considered individuals deserving protection, and how to balance human needs with ant conservation have no easy answers. The future relationship between humans and ants will likely involve continued conflict in some contexts and cooperation in others. As climate change and habitat destruction affect ant communities, monitoring and possibly conserving ant diversity will become more important. As cities expand, managing urban ant populations will remain a challenge. Understanding ants better may help us coexist with them more successfully. Learning which species are harmless, which are beneficial, and which truly require control allows more nuanced responses than treating all ants as pests. Appreciating their ecological roles may encourage protection of ant habitats. Let yourself breathe deeply, considering our place alongside these ancient and successful creatures. We share the world we've journeyed through many aspects of how ant colonies work. Let's bring these threads together and reflect on the remarkable nature of these societies that exist all around us. Ant colonies represent one of evolution's great successes. Through social organization, ants have become dominant in most terrestrial ecosystems. Their collective approach to survival allows them to accomplish what solitary organisms cannot. Division of labor creates efficiency that no individual could achieve alone. Communication enables coordination across thousands or millions of individuals. The colony structure allows long-term accumulation of resources and knowledge. Think about what we've explored together. We've seen how a single mated queen can give rise to a colony of millions. We've observed how workers divide tasks without any manager assigning them. We've watched as chemical trails guide thousands of foragers to food sources. We've witnessed nest construction that creates elaborate architecture without blueprints. We've understood how colonies defend themselves, care for their young, and adapt to changing conditions. All of this happens through the interaction of individuals following simple rules. Each ant responds to what she encounters directly: the pheromones she smells, the temperature she feels, the other ants she touches, the food she finds. No ant sees the bigger picture, yet the bigger picture emerges naturally from their combined actions. The colony as superorganism is a useful way to think about this. Like a body made of cells, a colony is made of individual ants. The workers are like cells performing specialized functions. The queen is like reproductive cells. The nest is like the body's structure. Chemical signals coordinate activity like hormones coordinate a body's functions. The colony maintains its internal environment like a body regulates temperature and chemistry. Yet colonies are also fundamentally different from single organisms. Individuals can leave and return. The boundary between colony and environment shifts and changes. Colonies can split and reform. New members join, old members die, yet the colony persists. It's a looser integration than we see in multicellular organisms, yet still remarkably cohesive. What emerges from ant colony organization is something we might call collective intelligence. The colony finds efficient solutions to complex problems, optimal foraging routes, appropriate task allocation, suitable nest sites. These solutions emerge without any planning, without any individual ant understanding the problem being solved. This is a profound insight. Intelligence, problem-solving, and adaptive behavior don't necessarily require a central processor, a brain that comprehends and plans. They can emerge from distributed interactions among simple components. Each ant is like a simple computer following basic programming, but millions of them interacting create sophisticated emergent behavior. Let yourself breathe slowly and consider this. In our human experience, we're so accustomed to thinking, planning, and understanding that it seems necessary for accomplishing complex tasks. But ant colonies show us a different path: organization without organizers, intelligence without understanding, purpose without planning. The resilience of ant colonies comes from this distributed nature. If you remove half the workers from a colony, the remaining workers adjust their behavior and the colony continues functioning. If you destroy part of the nest, workers rebuild. If conditions change, the colony adapts. There's no single point of failure that can collapse the entire system. This robustness has practical implications. Systems designed on similar principles, distributed control, simple local rules, emergent coordination, tend to be resilient and adaptive. From computer networks to organizational structures, the principles discovered in ant colonies apply broadly. But we should also recognize the limitations and failures. Not every founding queen succeeds. Most die before establishing a colony. Young colonies often fail during harsh conditions. Even mature colonies can be destroyed by disasters, diseases, or superior competitors. The colonies we observe are the successful ones, survivors of intense natural selection. The timescales of colony life offer a different perspective from our fast-paced human existence. A colony that lives for 20 years experiences tens or hundreds of generations of workers. To the colony, individual workers are temporary, replaceable, but each worker, during her brief life, contributes her small part to the enduring whole. This long-term perspective appears in how colonies operate. They invest in durable nest construction. They maintain food reserves. They produce new queens only when the colony is mature and stable enough. There's no rush, just the steady, patient work of colony maintenance and growth. Watching ants can be meditative precisely because of this quality. They're not frantic or rushed in most of their activities. They move purposefully but calmly. Each ant does her task without urgency, yet collectively their efforts accumulate into significant achievements. There's a lesson in this patience, this steady persistence toward long-term goals. We might also reflect on the role of individual ants within the collective. Each worker has a brief life, a few months typically. She'll never see most of the nest she helps build. She'll never know if the colony successfully produces new queens. Her contribution is tiny compared to the colony's total accomplishment. Yet without her contribution and millions like it, the colony couldn't exist. Is there meaning in an individual worker's life? From our human perspective, we might say her life serves the colony, giving her existence purpose. But the ant has no awareness of this. She simply does what her genetic programming and environmental cues direct her to do. The purpose exists at the colony level, not in her subjective experience, assuming she has any subjective experience at all. This raises philosophical questions about purpose and meaning. If purpose can exist without awareness of purpose, what does that tell us? Perhaps it suggests that meaning can be found in function, in contribution to something larger, regardless of whether that contribution is consciously understood. For humans observing ant colonies, there's a particular kind of peace in witnessing this natural order. The ants aren't troubled by existential questions. They don't worry about their purpose or meaning. They simply exist, each doing her part, the colony functioning as a result. There's a completeness to this, a kind of perfection in its simplicity. Different cultures have drawn different lessons from observing ants. Some emphasize the virtue of hard work and preparation. Others focus on cooperation and collective achievement. Some see models for human society. Others simply appreciate the beauty of natural organization. All of these perspectives have value. In our modern world, where human society faces complex collective challenges, climate change, resource management, disease control, social coordination, perhaps ant colonies offer useful analogies. They show that decentralized systems can solve complex problems. They demonstrate that local actions following simple principles can create beneficial global patterns. They prove that cooperation can outcompete pure individualism. Yet, we should be cautious about taking analogies too far. Human consciousness, individuality, and moral agency make our situation fundamentally different from ants. We can reflect on our choices in ways ants cannot. We can deliberately plan and design systems rather than relying purely on evolved instincts. We have capacities and responsibilities that ant colonies lack. Still, the core insights remain valuable. Distributed systems can be powerful. Simple rules consistently applied can yield complex adaptive behavior. Cooperation enables achievements impossible for individuals. These principles apply across many scales and contexts. Breathe deeply and let these thoughts settle. We've spent considerable time together understanding how ant colonies work. From chemical communication to nest architecture, from foraging strategies to collective intelligence, we've explored the many facets of these remarkable societies. Perhaps what's most calming about all of this is recognizing that such complexity exists naturally, requiring no intervention, no design, no conscious direction. The world is full of self-organizing systems working according to principles refined over millions of years of evolution. Ant colonies are one beautiful example among many. As you continue your day or drift into sleep, you might occasionally think of the ants beneath your feet or in the field nearby. Tiny creatures, each following simple rules, together creating something extraordinary. Billions of ants across the planet in millions of colonies, all participating in these ancient patterns of social organization. Their world continues whether we observe it or not. Queens lay eggs in darkened chambers. Workers tend larvae with patient care. Foragers follow chemical trails to food sources. Guards defend nest entrances. The colony breathes in its way as a living system. Life continues in its countless small forms, each organism playing its part in the larger patterns of existence. Thank you for taking this journey through the world of ant colonies. May the understanding you've gained bring you a sense of wonder at the complexity hidden in small things, and peace in recognizing the natural order that permeates the living world. Rest well.